Stand by for action! In the mid-60s, AP Films were developing and refining their particular set of filmmaking skills at speed. Their output in 1963 looked like this. Their output in 1965 looked like this. And there was only one series produced between them. We are about to discuss Stingray. Stingray was a quantum leap forward for both AP Films and television in general. The Avengers had yet to introduce their appeal, Doctor Who had only just finished its first season, and Star Trek was still 2 years away. This was the most exciting show on TV for young people. Refining the story setup of Fireball XL5, Stingray follows the World Aquanaut Security Patrol and their leading submarine, the titular Stingray, captained by Troy Tempest. After discovering races of undersea aliens, Troy and his co-pilot phones rescue the silent mariner from the clutches of the evil King Titan. From then on, they patrol Earth's oceans, giving assistance to those who need it and fighting to defend the land from those who would seek conquest. The series of characters drawn deeper than those from the earlier shows, and the effects team under Derek Meddings honed their craft in a way beyond anything that had been achieved on the small screen before. This was in part thanks to Stingray being the first UK show to be shot entirely in colour, the film stock allowing the crew to shoot at much higher speeds which, when slowed down, gave the effects weight and substance. Stingray has been rightly remembered as an important show in the Anderson catalogue, often seeing reruns alongside its successors Thunderbirds and Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons. The early noughties repeat runs are where I first encountered all three shows, but I must admit, as a kid I wasn't as taken with Stingray as I was the other two. I liked watching it, but I never watched the entire show or collected the toys or the videos like I did for the others. As I grew older and retained my interest in Thunderbirds and Captain Scarlet, I wrote off Stingray as an important but flawed step AP Films took on the path to greatness.
Oh, pardon me.
It wasn't until a few years ago that I decided to watch all the Anderson shows in their entirety, including finishing off the series I hadn't yet completed, including Stingray. And as an adult, I found a lot more to appreciate in the show than I had as a child. In fact, there were a few things that Stingray did better than the later shows. And that's what this video is today, taking a look at the show and seeing where it excels compared to what came afterwards. Let's get started. Let's begin by looking at the show's core cast of characters. Leaving aside the crew of Stingray itself for a moment and starting with the Marineville staff, we have Commander Sam Shaw, Lieutenant Atlanta Shaw, his daughter, and Lieutenant Fisher. Commander Shaw takes the role of leader, filled by Jeff Tracy in Thunderbirds and Colonel White in Captain Scarlet, and is easily the most three-dimensional of the bunch. At first he appears to be the gruff, no-nonsense type of guy you'd expect to be at the head of a military organisation.
What in thunder is that? A fish, sir. I know that, you dunderhead.
But we get to see other sides of his characters over the course of the series. He's shown to have a sense of humour off duty. He does genuinely respect his staff, not shouting at them for the sake of it. He's willing to look the other way to ensure the best outcome for them.
Of course, if some new evidence was to come to light, naturally it would have to be unofficial.
He'll even ensure that Troy mentors Lieutenant Fisher during his Aquanaut exams. We also get to see his backstory on screen in The Ghost of the Sea, as a hostile encounter with an undersea alien results in him losing the use of his legs. Said undersea alien afterwards ensuring his safety, setting up Shaw to repay the kindness by episode's end. This is way more character than we get with either Jeff or Colonel White. Whilst Jeff Tracy does have a compelling backstory of losing his wife, which inspires him to set up international rescue, that's firmly off screen. What's more, the idea of Jeff losing his partner is actually shared with Commander Shaw.
Let me know if there's any change in Atlanta's condition. Take care of her. She's all I got.
Jeff does show worry and concern for his sons and has a few lighter moments, but I feel we get less of an in-depth look at Jeff than we do Shaw. As for Colonel White, there's no contest. Colonel White does have a dry sense of humour, particularly showcased in White as Snow.
Captain Scarlet, I sentence you to death. However, as you are indestructible, there'd be little point in standing you up before a firing squad. Dismiss.
But is rarely seen as anything more than his military rank. Exceptions are few and far between.
Colonel,
No need for that, Captain. Adam, isn't it?
New Captain Scarlet does give Colonel White a daughter, and the relationship is complicated by his work for Spectrum, but there's not a hint of it in the original show. Shaw's daughter Atlanta also plays a part in humanising Shaw, and Shaw in turn deepens her character. Played by Lois Maxwell, i.e. Moneypenny, Atlanta Shaw is most often seen working in the Marineville control room, but occasionally joins the Stingray crew in missions. She and Commander Shaw are able to work effectively together at Marineville without their family connection complicating issues. Their relationship is used to positive effect in episodes like The Ghost of the Sea, where Atlanta is able to comfort her father after his nightmares.
Can't a guy have a private nightmare in peace without everyone rushing into his bedroom?
Or In Search of the Tasmanin, where Shaw enjoys teasing Atlanta about whether she can go on the trip to Africa. Their relationship is then upended and used to great effect in the episode Marineville Traitor, where it appears that Commander Shaw is a traitor in Marineville. Whilst Troy and Phones put the clues together, Atlanta obviously finds it difficult to believe her father would betray them, which generates interesting character conflict.
It's gotta be this way. He's
Don't say it, Troy.
Atlanta's not ever shown to be incompetent at something she should be able to do, given she's a lieutenant, even getting some episodes like Sea of Oil where, after being captured, she's able to negotiate with her captors, clear up the misunderstanding that started the conflict, and rig up a way to communicate with Stingray to prevent further bloodshed. She's a vast improvement over the character of Dr. Venus, who preceded both her and Marina.
I gather by the compliments, Steve, you want something to eat.
And then there's Lieutenant Fisher. I love Lieutenant Fisher. He doesn't appear very often or do very much, but when he does get featured, something unfortunate always happens to him.
Yeah, it's like the movies. They always miss.
Yeah, that's right. Nothing to worry about.
When Marineville gets invaded in The Invaders, Fisher is the only of the control staff to get gagged. He's the first of the regulars to be attacked in both Marineville Traitor and Invisible Enemy. He gets press ganged aboard Admiral Denver's galleon in Set Sail for Adventure, and Commander Shaw doesn't like his costume very much in The Cool Caveman. There's also an eager side to him. He's absolutely giddy when he gets to co-pilot Stingray in An Echo for Danger, even sneakily going to use the hydrophones when explicitly told not to, and later trains to become a fully fledged Aquanaut in Rescue from the Skies. This being Fisher, naturally the enemy decides to use his final exam as an attempt to destroy Stingray, and he's left manning the pumps. He's like Captain Magenta, except, actually okay at his job. Talking of Stingray, let's move over to her regular crew. Co-pilot for the craft is George Sheridan, referred to exclusively on screen as Phones. He works the hydrophone system. Speaking with a Texas drawl, Phones is loyal and very sweet, although not always the brightest button.
I just saw a fish man out there, Phones. I'm certain I did.
A fish man? Oh, you must have imagined it, Troy.
Phones, my love, do you know what series you're in? He'll get scammed in Treasure Down Below. Both he and Troy get tricked into repeating Marineville access phrases in Countdown. He'll be subjected to the loudest gaslighting in the world in An Echo for Danger, and he'll let the director's praise go to his head in Stand By for Action.
You're a natural actor. The way you said, is he? Great!
Is he?
Oh, he's done it again.
He takes it all in his stride though. I think the only time we really see him upset is during Set Sail for Adventure, when he and Fisher have to deal with Admiral Denver.
Heave to, my hearties! There's victuals when you're finished!
Oh, get lost.
Oh boy, he is cross. He and Fisher also share a habit of playing board games by themselves. Perhaps they should set up a board games night. The natural successors to Phone's character would be Virgil Tracy and Captain Blue, and Phones is a more distinct character than either. Virgil is my favourite of the Tracy brothers, but a lot of the things I like about him are less about his personality and more external factors. His interest in music and painting makes it easy to pop him in the background of scenes, as well as giving him something more interesting to stop doing when joining a conversation than reading a magazine. He flies the best Thunderbird with the coolest launch sequence. He more often than not gets to drive those fantastic pod vehicles, but none of these inform the character. He teases Alan a little in Moving Your Dead and End of the Road, but most of the time remains calm and level-headed. A great contrast to Scott, but not great character material in and of itself. Captain Blue suffers similarly. The character is given a few eccentricities.
Hello? Hello? Oh, this is 409. Could I have room service, please? Would you mind holding the Grand Opera a minute while I order lunch?
And a romantic interest in Symphony Angel, which provides some nice moments, but as a character he pales in comparison to Phones. A member of the Stingray crew seen far less frequently than Phones is arguably the series' most famous character, Marina. A silent mermaid with legs, Marina hails from the undersea kingdom of Pacifica, which we visit a couple of times along with her father Aphany. Marina's lack of speech gave the puppeteers a challenge of conveying her opinions purely through movement, and the writers the challenge of including her in group conversations, including the use of radios. It's perhaps unsurprising then that Marina was given less focus as the series went on, which is a shame. She's very interesting when used properly. One of the more famous character dynamics from an Anderson show is Atlanta and Marina both being interested in Troy Tempest, as set up in the pilot episode.
Atlanta, meet Marina, the latest recruit to the World Aquanaut Security Patrol.
Marina. Well, what do you know?
except this wasn't really a thing for most of the show. It's definitely there in the first third of the series or so. There's a line in episode 1.
Well, I certainly know what I'm up against.
Plant of Doom sees Atlanta distrust Marina, but for the entirely logical reason that she inadvertently brought a toxic plant into Marineville. Whilst she comments,
Besides, why should Marina have all the fun?
in Sea of Oil, to which Troy has a reaction but Marina doesn't. Treasure Down Below sees Troy forget a date with Atlanta whilst on shore leave with Marina. Troy calls Marina
The greatest girl in the world.
at the end of the Big Gun, but specifically after she saves their lives. Troy phones and Marina end up on holiday without Atlanta in Subterranean Sea, which makes Atlanta jealous, but that's because the four were planning a holiday together anyway before being recalled to duty. That's episodes 1 to 12 of 39 in production order. After that, the series kind of reshifts their relationships. With one exception, which we'll get to, Troy's romantic intentions are fully aimed at Atlanta after this, even teasing their relationship status by the final episode. Meanwhile, Atlanta and Marina are presented as friends who hang out together often and attend each other's dinner parties, and much before the later framing of the three's relationships with each other, it feels less antagonistic, although it has the unfortunate side effect of reducing Marina's role, though she never entirely disappears. Marina and Atlanta end up coming out of the series quite well considering how their immediate predecessor turned out. True, they never get to do anything quite as cool as Lady Penelope at her best, but they don't get lumbered with the writing of Lady Penelope at her worst.
Oh no, Parker, why did I ever come here? Why?
On the flip side, the Spectrum Angels are hyper competent and cool, but you have precious few scenes of them just hanging out. Probably the longest such scene is the one in the Amber Room at the beginning of Spectrum Strikes Back. Marina and Atlanta managed to balance being in the thick of the action for multiple episodes with allowing the audience to just chill with the characters. I'm not saying it's perfect by any means.
Those fellas had better not be late home for their Christmas dinner.
Thank you, Dennis Spooner. But it's better than you may expect or remember given the reputation of their particular plot lines. There's also Oink. He exists. Oink is the last in a line of Super Mario Nation pets like Dusty and Rocky from Four Feather Falls, Zuni from Fireball XL5, and the best example, Mitch the Monkey from Supercar. This was back when the shows were more heavily geared towards a child audience. The Super Mario Nation shows are all kids shows obviously, but this is a period when they begin to mature, and Oink doesn't really serve that goal. This bit of puppetry with a globe is neat, but that's about it, and he quickly vanished from the show. That leaves just one character to talk about. Troy Tempest is the absolute worst and the absolute best. The captain of Stingray can be brave and selfless and heroic, but he can also be petulant, short-tempered, and he's got an ego on him. Episodes like Emergency Marineville show him willing to sacrifice his own life to ensure both the safety of the world and the surrender of his attackers, all good and noble, but episodes like The Man from the Navy will show him ruining a party Marina puts on and storming out when he gets wound up by his opposite number from the Navy.
That's not what I call friendly.
Well, you started it.
Even when dealing with small-scale stuff, Troy's temper can get the better of it.
Say, Troy, you know what?
Good night.
For example in Countdown, where he begins to snap at phones when they and Atlanta are decorating Marina's new home.
Phones, watch what you're doing with that paint.
Oh, sorry, Troy.
Marina still hasn't got any idea of what we're planning, has she?
No, but Phones here almost gave it away when we were on patrol.
Shucks, Troy. Anybody could have done that.
It's Troy's ego that forms his biggest character fault. He spends pretty much all of Standby for Action in a grump after he's the only wasp replaced in a film being made about Stingray.
Will somebody tell me what I was like?
You were all right, Troy.
All right.
Look, Troy, either you've got it or you haven't got it.
Made worse by being replaced by movie star Johnny Swanara, in reality Steve Zodiac with a new do. Even when he gets to save the day, he's still clearly irked about the whole thing.
Johnny, you made it.
The name's Troy. Captain Troy Tempest.
His ego even crops up when trying to act nobly on occasion, his response to suspicion falling on Marina in Plant of Doom. Instead of framing his response as being about helping Marina, it's about proving himself right.
I believe Marina's innocent.
Fine words, Captain, but you'll have to prove it.
I'll prove it, even if I have to risk her life to prove it.
Which, no, Troy, this isn't how you help your friends. Troy's ego will even get some dream episodes so it can be fully brought to bear in probably the best dream episodes in the Anderson canon. Raptures of the Deep is the key exhibit here. Hallucinating from oxygen starvation, Troy imagines the world where he sets himself up as an underwater king, with Phones as his servant and Atlanta and Marina attending to his every need, with Marina even breaking her vow of silence to speak especially to him.
You see, I can speak. In a way.
Which, Troy, lad, mate, pop it, get help. It even gets to the point where Troy sings the theme tune. Strangely not the first time this has happened in a Super Mario Nation show. This is about the last time in the series that any part of Troy's conscious or subconscious expresses romantic interest in Marina, and it's mostly a result of wanting the lead character to sing the theme. There's also Troy Tempest, where after dozing off, Troy dreams that all Marineville's greatest enemies are having a dinner party to make their ultimate plans against them, whilst also being shrunk to 2 foot tall, conveniently the same size as the puppets. Again, not the first time this happened, and far from the last either. It's interesting to compare Troy Tempest's dream episodes with Symphony Angels in Attack on Cloudbase. In the latter example, Symphony herself is absent from the dream, and exaggerated versions of her friends meet their ultimate fate at the hands of the Mysterons. You could read this as her fears that the War of Nerves can't be won, and that the Mysterons have yet to unleash their full power upon the Earth. Meanwhile, Troy's over here just dreaming about how awesome he is, how his enemies are conspiring to make him feel small, and also cavemen sometimes. Now, I'm aware I'm listing a lot of Troy's negative qualities here. It might sound like I'm trying to be down on the character. I'm not. These flaws make Troy so much more interesting than his replacements. Scott Tracy is probably the closest character to the Troy Tempest model in Thunderbirds, and while the character shares Troy's heroic qualities and occasional lack of brain cells,
just record a few simple phrases that she would have heard you say many times.
I don't know what to say. Hi there, Marina. Heck, I'm stuck.
You're in charge. What'll be your first decision?
I contact John in Thunderbird 5.
Come in, John.
International Rescue from Thunderbird 5. Hi, Scott. What's wrong?
Well, nothing, John.
Why the call then, Scott?
I just wondered how things were.
Scott doesn't really have any of Troy's rough edges. Scott's defining characteristic is probably his determination.
Look, there are 600 people up there with about 40 minutes to live. Now, you can't help them, but I believe we can. Now, what's it gonna be?
Which, that's not a characteristic in short supply amongst the Andersons' heroes. I'd argue that on paper, Scott Tracy is a less interesting character than Troy Tempest, and ends up being elevated mostly by Shane Rimmer's fantastic vocal performance.
Regain height and keep away from the pyramid. It's gonna go up at any moment.
But Scott, are you all right?
Don't ask questions, just do as I say and beat it.
Troy's romantic woes end up being transferred to Alan Tracy, and while they do help Alan stand out amongst his brothers as being more developed, he can hardly be called the main character, unless we're discussing the movies. Meanwhile, Captain Scarlet ends up being less distinctly drawn than either Scott or Troy. The main notable thing about him ends up being his indestructible nature. This does lead to him being a fearless character, but as Lieutenant Green didn't actually say in Attack on Cloudbase,
anyone can be brave if they're indestructible.
We do get a few moments of Paul Metcalf rather than Captain Scarlet.
Don't worry, Symphony will be all right. Adam?
Yeah, I'm fine.
But they're few and far between. For the show with the most realistic puppets of the three, Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons' priorities were far less frequently on humanising its characters than its predecessors. The show ends up utilising Troy's character flaws in interesting ways to drive its stories. We spoke briefly before about the man from the Navy in Stand By for Action about Troy's ego getting the better of him, but in each story it's provoked by someone worse than Troy. Jacques Jourdain, the titular man from the Navy, will not shut up about how much better the Navy are than the Wasps, even trying to romance and charm Atlanta. Troy's reaction isn't right, but we understand exactly where it comes from, and he does at least attempt to make amends with Marina. It's not much, and not in person, and he won't make up with Atlanta until episode's end, but we've got to encourage steps in the right direction, no matter how small. Mind you, with how Troy and Phones react to Jacques' clearly coded message.
Fire missile.
Fire is the word, Tempest. This one is going to be dead on target.
Cut the wisecracks, buddy. Follow procedure, will you, and fire that missile.
Maybe he has a point. Meanwhile, in Stand By for Action, Johnny Swanara, Troy's replacement, ends up being shallow, coasting on his looks with no actual substance. The minute things go wrong...
I don't have to put up with this. It's not in my contract.
Admittedly, he's a civilian, but you'd hope for better than that in Dire Straits. They'll also balance out Troy's negative traits with other characters' reactions.
We'll just have to watch our step.
You will, Phones.
How's that, Troy?
Because I'm going to set you up as a guinea pig.
Well, thanks for nothing.
As well as putting Troy through the ringer, the villainous Larry Gray leaves Troy Tempest to his fate in a forest fire in Tune of Danger, stating,
I just told them I'd kidnapped Troy Tempest and they let me straight through. Must have been glad to get rid of you.
Which, obviously, it's actually Marineville security living up to their consistently high standards.
Well, what's on the other seat? Well, I've just kidnapped someone and I'm smuggling them out.
but it amuses me to think that there's at least one grain of truth to that. Overall though, it's clear that Troy and the rest of the Marineville staff form their own little family unit. They'll feel more like family than the Tracys will at times in Thunderbirds. Particularly as the series progresses, more scenes take place with the characters relaxing or discussing important events in the Shaw's apartment, even going so far as to move the control console there in Eastern Eclipse after the control room is put out of action. These deeper connections between the characters make moments like Commander Shaw's seeming betrayal and Marineville traitor hit harder, or everyone attempting to find evidence to clear Phones' name in an echo of danger that much more heartwarming. This warm and cozy atmosphere then helps elevate the next aspect to discuss. Okay, before we get into this one, let's address the green glowing undead elephant in the room. The Mysterons are a fantastic sci-fi creation, an unknowable and alien race that remain unknowable and alien no matter how much we investigate them. Their mode of combat makes fantastic use of the Century 21 team's special effects unit, plus the slight uncanny valley properties of the more realistic puppets. The Mysterons are actually able to win on occasion, and their regular losses can be attributed to the fact that they're waging a war of nerves. They're not trying to blow us up, they're trying to make us paranoid enough that we blow ourselves up. The Mysteron Rings of Light and that voice.
This is the voice of the Mysterons.
Are about as iconic as anything the Super Mario Nation show has produced. Now, tell me something about the Mysterons' characters. Not their reconstructions, but the Mysterons themselves. They have weird ideas about vengeance? They sometimes change their plans mid-flow? Yeah, that unknowable vibe that works so well for them kind of makes it impossible to dig deeper into their character by definition. Captain Black does have that moment in Manhunt where a little of his old personality resurfaces, but that's the closest he gets to having a developed character. Most of the time he's just a mouthpiece for the Mysterons. They work fantastically in the kind of stories told in Captain Scarlet, but not so much as characters in their own right. Meanwhile, the Hood. The Hood is one of Thunderbird's weak links. A show about saving people from disaster doesn't really need a regular villain, and most of the time doesn't actually have one. The Hood only appears in 6 episodes of the TV show, and his threat and effectiveness varies wildly between them. His hypnotic powers also feel off to me. It's a show about technology, there's no magic anywhere else in the show except for him. It's one of those things that I think got a pass because it allows the character to be genuinely intimidating and violent without giving him a gun or making a puppet physically fight. And that lighting up the puppet's eyes looks really cool and is the kind of thing that couldn't be done anywhere near as well in an actual actor. Unfortunately, when combined with his accent, the character begins to run into some unfortunate stereotypes. The character can be made to work without either the accent or the magic. The Thunderbirds Are Go version of the character loses both, makes him British and hones in on his key motivation of learning international rescue secrets, and it's a version of the character I much prefer watching. They even managed to work in the glowing eyes. But, as before with new Captain Scarlet, we're only discussing the original puppet Hood here. And just to be clear, I'm not saying Stingray is free of this either, and obviously these shows are 60 years old, we're going to run into stuff like this from time to time. But it is a potential barrier to entry for newcomers, one that doesn't exist in Stingray's regular villains. Chief among them is King Titan, ruler of Titanica. In line with the show as a whole, Titan is lighter in tone than the villains that came after him. Stingray is much more firmly a kids show than Thunderbirds or Captain Scarlet, and appropriately its villain leans a similar way. What this does though is give Titan a greater range to play with. You can have a story like The Master Plan, where Titan gets Aquamphibian Banksy to infect Troy Tempest with a virus and ransom Secure in exchange for Marina 1 week, where Titan is imposing, mostly serious and effective, and then do something like Titan Goes Pop, where Titan completely misses the point about who pop star Duke Dexter is.
So, Duke Dexter is coming to Marineville. Who is Duke Dexter?
Thinking he's an enemy of the humans, and ends the episode watching Duke's show with his henchmen.
If he keeps this up, they will be ready to be conquered in no time at all. Success at last!
He's more entertaining to watch than the villains of the other shows, and you've got to love the idea of an undersea king who worships a being that might be an all-powerful undersea god, but is in all probability just a fish. What's more, Titan actually has other characters he regularly interacts with, giving you an opportunity to learn a little about Titan's character by how he treats his underlings. Most frequently seen is Surface Agent X20, a character with a highly memorable design and an incredibly distinctive voice which was based upon Peter Lorre.
At last I shall be successful and destroy Stingray.
Fittingly, X20's actor Robert Easton picked up the voice working on the film Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea whilst playing the role of Sparks, whose voice he adapted for phones.
Since the heat went over 139, radio contact is highly erratic.
X-20 is Titan's key lackey, operating from the island of Lemoy, spying on the Wasps, reporting developments of interest to Titan, and enacting his schemes.
I give the orders, you think of ways to carry them out.
This means X-20 is often given more screen time than Titan, and through his various disguises even gets to interact with our heroes on a semi-regular basis. Something that's not true of the Hood or Captain Black. As with Titan, the nature of the show means X-20 tends to skew as a comedy villain, with schemes like funding the production of a feature film to kill Troy Tempest or kidnapping a pop star to do something. Mind you, he routinely manages to infiltrate Marineville without detection, although this is more a reflection on Marineville's security than X-20's skill, and mad as his disguises are, he's never been discovered by any of the Wasps, and he's able to read lips, which is especially impressive considering these characters are puppets. Having two regular villains, one subordinate to the other, was used to great effect with Pedro and Fernando in Four Feather Falls, and Master Spy and Zarin from Supercar, and continues to work here. It's something the Hood lacks on a regular basis, and when he does enter into deals with another character, he's always a subordinate partner, surprisingly. Titan and X-20's interactions with each other inform the other's character, and unsurprisingly the two don't seem to like each other very much. There are a few instances of Titan getting impatient or annoyed with X-20.
But your majesty...
Why must all my subjects use the word but?
That is the answer, Titan.
Silence, I say. I'm thinking.
And a few instances of X-20 becoming frustrated by Titan.
Why must Titan always give me the impossible tasks? I must be crazy working for Titan. I ought to get my head examined.
It adds a fun dynamic to their scenes, and the characters can carry entire sections of episode by themselves without needing to keep cutting back to the heroes. A fun visual element of the show is the various undersea aliens that are encountered by the Stingray crew. In contrast to Titan and X-20, very few of them get distinct personalities or motivations, but this can be more than made up for with the fun designs the sculptors came up with for them. Chief among the minor villains are the Aquamphibians under Titan's rule, who look intimidating enough to work as villains and just odd enough to be funny. They'll play up both traits of them throughout the series, allowing them to take the lead for certain bits of action, whilst also putting them in silly costumes and having them dance to pop music. Other fun designs include Grouper and Noctis from A Nut from Marineville, this Lumiere looking chap from Treasure Down Below, and Maritimus from The Big Gun, who looks like he took his car to the crusher and forgot to get out. His whole species in fact look like they went bobbing for apples in a cement mixer. Look at them all standing around there like giant half-chewed rubber tip pencils. I'm saying he looks like Unsurprisingly, Stingray has awesome music. It was scored by Barry Gray, there was no way it was going to be anything less than excellent. However, Stingray's score is quite special indeed. A lot of the score created for this series would then go on to regularly appear in future series, prominent examples including the eerie moods of the Ghost Ship, the March of the Oysters from Secret of the Giant Oyster, and the opening score from The Big Gun. After hearing that last one so often out of context, it was a little surreal to see it sync to the action it was written for the first time I saw it. Even beyond the frequently repeated pieces, there's some incredible score here. One of the best examples has to be Tune of Danger, where a jazz band rehearsing is intercut with Troy forced to escape from a burning building, scored by a theme that jumps between light, airy and piano-led to a full brass, pacey version of the same cue. Fantastic stuff. The music for the titles and the end credits deserves special mention too. Ending each episode is Aqua Marina, a charming little number sung by Gary Miller. Although sung about Marina, her full name isn't actually Aqua Marina, at least so far as she's said. The phrase does pop up in the show though.
All checks here, Aquamarine.
Which puts a slightly different spin on it, I guess.
It's okay. Everything's okay. Everything's grand. It's all gone to plan and nothing is wrong.
The opening titles are fantastic too. Lots of pace, lots of energy, lots of bongo. I wonder if these are the best titles for an Anderson show. I don't know if it beats Thunderbirds, but it's a much closer run thing than I'd care to admit. Stingray's approach to its titles is interesting compared to Thunderbirds and Captain Scarlet. Since Four Feather Falls, the Super Marionation shows have promoted their puppet characters in the titles as if they were the star actors, which continued through these three series. Thunderbirds starts with the iconic countdown, a tease of this episode, and then static shots of the characters superimposed over the ships they're linked with, or Braindeer's lab I guess. Captain Scarlet actually has two sections to its title sequence, the alleyway intro to set the tone like Thunderbirds' countdown, then enough of the action to build intrigue as opposed to Thunderbirds' teaser, then the second title sequence showcasing our key characters and the locations we'd most associate with them. By this point the shows had expanded their cast significantly, meaning if they were going to be featured in the titles would have to be more or less entirely dedicated to them. This wasn't the case for Stingray, where only Troy Tempest is given the credit before launching into a mix of stock footage and action shots pulled from the first few episodes, telling you less who to expect, but what to expect. Plus, explosions. It's certainly engaging. Crediting the puppet stars didn't last past Captain Scarlet. Joe 90 instead features Joe and the Big Rat as its title sequence. Maybe it would have been weird to follow the Joe 90 caption with starring Joe McClane. The starring caption does return for the Secret Service, only it appears over the actor who just so happens to share the same name as the puppet. As mentioned in the introduction, Stingray was the first UK show to be shot entirely in colour. Other shows did have individual instalments filmed in colour, like The Adventures of Sir Lancelot, yes that is William Russell, but also had instalments shot in black and white. While Stingray was shot in colour, 100% of the original UK audience would have been watching in black and white. The first UK colour broadcaster would end up being BBC Two in 1967, with BBC One and ITV not moving to colour until 1969. And, fittingly, one of the earliest ITV colour broadcasts was, of course, Thunderbirds.
How simply ducky.
The choice to film in colour was to impress US broadcasters who were already moving over to colour television in hopes of a network sale, also the reason why so many of the Anderson shows have so many American characters. The choice ended up future-proofing this series, making it more likely that future broadcasters would choose to repeat these shows rather than the earlier black and white ones. Being the first of the Andersons' colour shows, there are several sequences highlighting the new medium. Decorating Marina's new apartment in Countdown and the subterranean sea in Subterranean Sea are highlights. That, along with the variety of undersea aliens and environments on display, means Stingray often makes bolder use of colours than its successors. The Thunderbirds machines as the hero craft tend towards striking colours, but colour elsewhere in the show is considerably more grounded, bright colours being saved for machines of heavy industry where they may be expected. On paper, Captain Scarlet and the Mysteron should have an edge on Stingray, but in practice it doesn't. Giving each Spectrum operative a chromatic code name is neat, but beyond the colourful captains, the world of 2068 tends to veer even more realistic than its predecessors, leaving less room for vibrant colours on the regular. The big exception to this is the interior of the Mysteron cities, which, barring flashbacks, we only see in 2 out of 32 episodes. It's a shame these shows were originally shown in black and white. Similar to the reception of Magical Mystery Tour when shown on the BBC, I wonder how much of the effect of episodes like Subterranean Sea was lost on the audience this way. You could see the adventures of Stingray in full colour at the time though, thanks to the launch of TV21 during the broadcast of the show, with Stingray being one of the strips included upon launch. Another thing the crew seem eager to show off is their puppetry skills. Compared to some of the space scenes from Fireball XL5, the underwater scenes mostly have a weight and grace that helps the world feel that little bit more real. What's more, they're able to depict puppets swimming at speed, and the effect isn't all that bad. The aquamphibians in particular look excellent, their non-human design surely helping in that regard. Each Super Mario Nation show was pushed further and further towards realism, which meant avoiding actions the puppets couldn't realistically perform, for example, walking. That's the reason for those cool launch sequences, and why Stingray, Thunderbird 3 and the Angel Interceptors are bordered by sitting in chairs. There are examples of fantastic puppetry throughout all the Super Mario Nation shows, both subtle and ambitious, but I don't think there's any sequence that shows off just what the AP Films team can do better than the skating sequence in A Christmas to Remember. There's not a lot of commentary I can give on this just looks fantastic. I still can't quite figure out the logistics of how they got certain shots. Incredible stuff. As we mentioned before, Stingray is more firmly a kids show than its successors. The overall tone is somewhat lighter, although not lacking in action. Even in the first episode, one of the more straight-laced episodes, you still have things like Titan measuring time in marine minutes, threatening to send Troy and Phones to Aquatraz prison, which you do get to see in TV21, and the Aquamphibians' language sounding like blown bubbles. In case it wasn't clear by the 2 submarines jumping out the water in the titles, we're in full cartoon comic book territory here, and I love it. The show is generally light and breezy with enough action and explosions to keep a simpleton like me entertained. Unlike its successors, Stingray is much more willing to play with the tone of individual episodes. You do get episodes in each show that veer away from the typical tone and format, but with Stingray these shifts feel much more pronounced. The general straightforward and easy air to the show means you don't actually have to do much to end up with a very different experience. A good example of this is Invisible Enemy, where Stingray comes across a comatose man floating in a boat. Exactly how I look after a Friday night. Slowly, silently, he begins to incapacitate the whole of Marineville. With dim lights, careful camera work, and a brilliantly sculpted puppet, Stingray gets incredibly spooky for one episode. This would be a great one to broadcast at Halloween, and thus it was broadcast in February. Stingray is also good at approaching similar topics from distinct angles. As mentioned before, Tune of Danger features an excellent score, fitting for an episode which features a jazz band. This is the kind of show we're dealing with, where Marineville has its own jazz band, and the jazz band has their own sub. Jazz music and the band in general are treated as respectfully as they can be in a puppet show, the main quirkiness factor coming in with a bomb placed on a double bass that will be activated by playing it, destroying the wasps as they visit Pacifica. Fortunately, exploding during rehearsals won't be an issue.
Rehearsals bore me.
Sounds like every bass player I've ever known. Another episode tackles music, only instead of jazz, it tackles pop. In the UK, in 1964. And the angle it chooses is... Shaw openly dismisses superstar Duke Dexter as noise, with only the younger Marineville staff digging his music. The fan hysteria is played up throughout the episode.
Main gate requesting extra men.
Extra men? You're at double strength now, Sergeant.
We'll need the National Guard, sir, if these fans decide to attack.
With A Hard Day's Night releasing in July 1964, shortly after production on Stingray started, getting Troy Tempest to reenact the beginning of that film has to be intentional.
Gee, I always thought fans liked their idols.
The key joke of the episode even ends up being Titan completely missing the point, believing the way Duke Dexter's fans treat him means he's an enemy of the Terranians. Spoilers, by the way. Meanwhile, in Stand By for Action, the concept of celebrity is tackled via a different lens. Whereas the worst you could accuse Duke Dexter of is maybe not being the brightest bulb of the bunch, Johnny Swinara's vapidity is played up as much as it can be.
They love me! They love me!
Including how he uses his reputation and looks to get attention from his female fans.
Every time you talk to a dame, they pass out. Yeah. Great, isn't it?
The previous two episodes we've discussed are from Dennis Spooner. If you've been here before, you may remember that I didn't always get on with his episodes of Thunderbirds, but I did enjoy his work on Doctor Who. Thankfully, Stingray ends up being a much more suitable vehicle for his talents as a comedy action writer. A fine example of this is Set Sail for Adventure, where Admiral Denver ends up getting too infused about the good old days.
In those days, sailors were rugged, tough, real he-men. Those men didn't have radar, automatic bosuns. They weren't spoon-fed namby-pambys.
As a society, we're never moving past this, are we? To prove his point, he intends to sail a galleon across the ocean. The episode manages to easily balance comedy, suspense and adventure, the storm sequence managing all three. This was, in fact, being shot only the room across from the Inferno in Tune of Danger. How the Slough Studios survived these shows, I will never know. So that's some of the stuff I think works well in Stingray, better than what came after. And after all this, you may be interested to know that my favourite show of the three is Thunderbirds, followed by Captain Scarlet, and then Stingray. There's no trains at all in Stingray, not so much as a single wagon. What can I say, I'm basic. But whilst the other two are still my favourites, I've come to appreciate Stingray on its own terms a lot more as an adult. With an episode of Thunderbirds or Captain Scarlet, you more or less know what you're getting into week on week, with a few exceptions to prove the rule. Stingray though, anything could happen in the next half hour. Consecutively week on week you have the exploration of alien seas, the Loch Ness Monster, because of course, Marineville invaded, giant oysters, oxygen starvation madness, and a film parody. I couldn't say hand on heart that the show is consistent all the way through like the other two, but if you're aware of the Super Mario Nation shows, then there's going to be at least one episode that grabs you. The series is available on DVD and Blu-ray, it's available to stream for free on ITVX, and it's being uploaded week on week to the ITV Retro YouTube channel. If you've somehow made it this far and have never seen the show before, I highly recommend you give it a try. Cheers for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.